A Necron tomb world is not a graveyard. It's a weapon that's been switched off for 60 million years, waiting for someone to flip it back on. Right now, somewhere in the galaxy, billions of these things are standing in the dark. Not sleeping exactly. Not dead either. Just waiting for one signal. And here's the part most people don't realize, that signal doesn't have to come from a god or a war. Sometimes it comes from a miner with a drill. So let's go from the surface down to the vaults and figure out what's actually buried down there, who's in charge of it, and what happens when it wakes up. The hierarchy, not every tomb world, matters the same. Necrons kept their entire class system after 60 million years of sleep. Nobody down there is equal. At the top, you've got crown worlds. These are capital planets. This is where the Pharaoh lives, basically a supreme ruler along with the highest court in the dynasty. Pristine, heavily defended, built to survive anything. Below that, core worlds. Industrial planets, forges, repair vaults, the machinery that keeps a dynasty running. And at the bottom, fringe worlds. Outer garrisons, minor outposts, and after 60 million years, a lot of them are damaged. Tectonic shifts, solar decay, scavengers picking through the ruins. And here's the thing worth sitting with for a second: all of this exists because one Necron looked at his own species and decided the smartest move available to him was to make everyone disappear for 60 million years. We'll get to him. What's actually underneath the dirt? It's not tunnels. It's a machine the size of a planet. You wouldn't hear soldiers first. You'd hear silence. Because somewhere beneath kilometers of stone, an intelligence has been awake for 60 million years, and it already knows you're there. That's the deep spirit. It repairs damage on its own, activates defenses the instant something intrudes, and does all of it without ever waking a single lord up early. That alone would be unsettling enough. But the deep spirit doesn't fight its own battles. It has hands for that. Scarabs, spiders, wraiths, swarms of automated constructs called canoptech. Caretakers that turn violent the moment you dig too deep. Bad news if you're an intruder. But they're still just machines, doing a job. What's underneath them isn't a machine job. It's a wall against reality itself. Blackstone arrays, towering pylons that don't just defend a tomb world. They cancel out psychic energy entirely. And step into the wrong region and you're standing somewhere the warp itself can't reach. And even that isn't the deepest secret. The real storage is folded into subspace, pocket dimensions layered beneath the rock where you can't measure them with your eyes. Billions of warriors, entire war machines, full armies, compressed into almost nothing. A planet that looks completely empty from orbit can be sitting on an army the size of a small country. None of that gear is decorative either. Gauss weapons don't just wound, they strip a target apart atom by atom, so there's nothing left to bury. Phase technology lets whole squads step out of reality and back in somewhere else, mid-fight. And the worst of it, the Tesseract labyrinths aren't weapons or armor at all. They're prisons small enough to hold in one hand, built to fold something ancient and dangerous into a space smaller than a coin, forever. And the worst part? You don't even need a war to trigger any of it. A tech priest drilling for geothermal power. A miner who cracks open the wrong rock looking for ore. A relic hunter who moves the wrong stone off a wall. Any of that can ping a planet's deep spirit awake. One bad afternoon on a mining colony, and by nightfall, it's a harvesting ground. The crown worlds, a few of these planets, aren't just important, they define entire dynasties. Somewhere out there is a museum where every exhibit is still alive. Not statues, not replicas, actual beings pulled from across galactic history and frozen mid-moment, arranged on shelves like curiosities. That's solemnness, and it belongs to a collector named Trazen the Infinite, who spent longer than most civilizations have existed treating the galaxy as his own private gallery. Somewhere else, there's a room where someone can erase a star just by wanting to. A device called the Celestial Orrery models every star in the galaxy in real time, and destroying one on the model destroys the real thing, instantly, no warning. That room sits on Thanatos, home of the Oriskar dynasty, and they guard it like everyone's life depends on it. Because it does. And then there's the one whose greatest strength was simply waking up intact. Mandragora is the capital of the Sautek dynasty, the biggest and strongest Necron dynasty in the galaxy, and its wake-up went perfectly, no rot, no corrupted systems, nothing standing between its ruler and the war he wanted. That ruler is Imhotep the Stormlord, and by the time most dynasties had finished stretching Awake, he was already conquering an entire region of the galaxy. Here's the part that matters later. Imhotep doesn't answer to anyone. Not even the one Necron every other dynasty is supposed to kneel to. Keep that in mind. The Silent King earlier, I said all of this exists because of one decision. Here's that story. His name was Sarek, last of the Silent Kings, ruler of the Sarkhan dynasty, at the top of the entire Necron hierarchy. Before any of this, before the sleep, before the tombs, his people were the Necronter, and they were dying, fighting a war they were losing against a race called the Old Ones. So Sarek made a deal. Beings called the Catan offered his people new bodies, living metal, immortal, unstoppable. He said yes. His people became Necrons. They won the war. But Sarek realized what he'd actually done. His entire species had traded their souls for those bodies. No taste, no touch, no breath, none of it left. Just a hollow, permanent quiet where a person used to be. And worse, they were tools for the Catan, who they'd made the mistake of trusting. So Sarek turned on them. He shattered the Catan into pieces and locked them away. Then he made a second call. Quieter than the first, he cut the central command that had kept every dynasty answering to one throne. He wanted his people to wake up free, not owned. And then he made his final call, put his people to sleep for 60 million years, until their enemies had rotted from the inside, out from time and infighting, so the Necrons could wake up and simply take back everything. He's the only Necron who remembers being alive as something other than metal. Every other Necron forgot. He didn't get that mercy. But freedom has a cost. Without one command holding everything together, the dynasties woke up as strangers to each other. Some, like Imhotep, woke up and simply kept walking. No king was going to tell him what to conquer. Sarek came back expecting an empire. What he found was a house full of children who'd grown up without him, and some of them had no interest in letting him back in. When a tomb world breaks somewhere across the galaxy right now, hundreds of other tomb worlds are waking at different speeds, in different states. Not every world wakes up clean. Some come apart. The worst example is Drazak the Bone Kingdom now, ruled by Valgal the Fallen King, entirely infected by something called the Flayer Curse. Necrons obsessed with skin and bone, hoarding flesh from anything they can find. Every landing becomes a feeding ground. Every battlefield becomes a pantry. One dynasty took a different path entirely. Borsis was hollowed out and turned into a weapon, and there's no gentler way to say it. The planet itself became the battleship, a mobile tomb world capable of wiping out star systems on its own. Killing it cost one Space Marine chapter almost everything they had. But the saddest one on this list isn't a monster or a weapon. It's a gentleman. His name is Zandrek, and he rules a world called Gidrim. Something in his awakening broke, not violently, just wrong. He genuinely believes he's still alive, still an organic commander, still fighting old wars with old world honor. When he captures enemy officers, he doesn't execute them. He invites them to formal banquets, treats them like guests of war, like a general from a conflict that ended 60 million years ago and never told him it was over. His second in command, Vargard Oberon, never corrects him. Not once does Oberon tell him the truth. He just quietly wins the battle. Zandrek thinks he's fighting honorably and lets his king keep believing whatever gets him through the war. Zandrek is what happens when a mind survives, but the memory doesn't. Most Necron warriors don't even get that much. 60 million years of stored power leaking, radiation eating away at what's left. Most of the rank and file aren't thinking anything anymore. They're just moving. Blank drones running on old orders. It's only the nobles, the lords and overlords, who kept enough of themselves to still be minds. And in a lot of cases, what they kept wasn't stable. Gidrim isn't the exception down there. It might be one of the gentler outcomes. What Sarek's own people are doing now, Sarek came back expecting to rebuild something. Sleep until your enemies rot. Wake up, take it all back. That was the plan. Instead, he found out some of his own people had become worse than the enemy he spent 60 million years trying to outlast. One of his dynasties, the Awoke, has gone so far past taking territory back that even Sadek's own allies have started questioning it. In a region called the Pariah Nexus, the Awoke aren't just fighting the Imperium, they're capturing entire populations. Not for slaves, not for territory. They're stockpiling victims for future rituals in case the galaxy ever gets fully cleansed of anything living. And it isn't only the Awoke ignoring him. Imhotep still won't kneel. The dynasty Sarek, built to be free of one throne, is now in places refusing to answer to him at all. The king who put his whole species to sleep to save it woke up and found a monster wearing his own colors and an empire that no longer agrees he's in charge of it. The parallel every dynasty on this list looks different. Mandragora conquers. Solemnus collects. Gidrim dreams. Strip all of it down, though, and every one of them runs on the exact same command. Sleep, wake, obey. That's not just a Necron idea. Strip away the sci-fi layer, and it's a system real empires have run on to, a ruling class that goes dormant, untouchable, while everyone below keeps fighting wars they never started. Nobody on a fringe world ever meets the Pharaon. They just inherit the war he decided to start 60 million years before they were switched on. Here's the truth. Every layer of a Necron dynasty quietly runs on obey the command protocols. Hold your world. And eventually you'll wake into a galaxy that's yours again. And in some strange way, that's still a kind of life. Zandrek still throws his banquets. Trazen still fills his museum, one stolen piece at a time. Whatever's left of a soul in these things still finds something to hold on to. The Necrons didn't build an empire that needs everyone to wake up right. They built one that just needs enough of them to wake up at all. If you had to survive being woken up in a broken tomb world corrupted memory, no idea how long you'd slept, which dynasty would you actually want to wake up in?